Welcome to Buckets Finals Edition. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Brandon Anderson. He's NBA futures analyst. This is your NBA Finals series preview and best bets as the Dallas Mavericks take on the Boston Celtics. The Mavericks, the 5th seed in the Western Conference, one of only a handful of teams to ever make it to the finals as more than a 4 seed, looking to become the second team as more than a 4 seed to win the NBA Finals. The Celtics, obviously, the 1 seed, looking to add banner 18 to their illustrious franchise history. We're going to give you best bets. We're going to break it all down. We've had some time to do some research, so that's what Brandon and I have done, is we've done some research. If you want angles, this is the podcast for you. We're going to break down the matchup stuff. We're going to have props angles and stuff like that. We're going to have all these types of things to talk about. This week on Buckets, we are going to have a props episode. That's going to be Brandon Anderson, Jim Turvey, and Joe Delera, the future Jays, and Brandon. I'll be playing host and basically looking at them sideways like a confused Cocker Spaniel. And then we're also going to do how to bet the Mavericks. If you like the Mavericks, we're going to tell you how to bet them in the best way. If you like Boston, we're going to tell you how to bet them in the best way. We're going to have game 1 best bets on Wednesday. We'll have that for you. Jay Money's going to be along with me alongside Jim Turvey. It's going to be a great week on Buckets. We're going to have Buckets live as well. I'll have more announcements about that later this week. I'm so glad to have you guys with us as we finish the season strong. Brandon, no chit chat, no dilly dally. Let's start off. We're going to go ahead and get to our best bets right now. The lines of BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Celtics minus 225, Mavs plus 180 on the series price. Boston minus 1.5 is at plus 105. That's to win in 6 games or less. Dallas plus 105 is at minus 125. That's to win or push it to game 7. I will start with you. What's your best bet for the NBA Finals?
Matt Moore, it's the finals. Got to keep it easy, right? Nice, easy, easily digestible bet. Not going to happen. This is my most complex best bet yet. Give me the Celtics in 5 or 6 or 7. Celtics to win but not sweep. I'm betting the 3 parts separately. So in 5 is plus 340. In 6 is plus 475. In 7 is plus 450. This is a full unit on each bet. So this is a 3-unit bet. It's a whopper. I get them all at minus 140 implied instead of that minus 225 series. Boston to win, but not sweep. That's the bet.
Okay, I'm on Celtics minus 1.5 on the series spread line. That is plus 108 you can find in the market. And I'm on Celtics minus 2.5 at a smaller percentage of your unit at plus 230. You can find that as well. There are prices at plus 105, plus 175 consensus in the market. So Brandon and I are both on Boston. I wondered if you were going to waver here. How close are you to wavering with this best bet?
I think the question is what you mean by wavering. This series is priced very well. Like, as always, and you've pointed this out on Buckets before, the more complicated my bet gets, the more you listeners should understand that I am kind of admitting, this is priced pretty well. I don't love the basic bets that we can do here. So I looked for angles. I considered Mavs in 6 or 7 as a Mavs bet. If I was going to play them, that would be the way that I would do it. The reason I wavered, Matt, is because if you've been listening all along the way, and you certainly have, Matt, I have gotten wrong every single Dallas series so far. Every series we have done with the Mavericks, here's my process. I go into it thinking, all right, so the Mavericks are kind of overrated. I'm ready to pick against them. Let's do this. And then I do all my prep, and I'm like, well, shoot, I guess there are actually some pretty good matchup stuff here. I sort of like Dallas more than I thought. I had better give them a little more credit. So, against the Clippers in round 1, I thought, okay, I'm giving them more credit. I really like the Clippers, but the series will go long. Clippers in 6 or 7. The series went long. I was right. I got the bet wrong. Then I did the exact same thing in round 2 against the Thunder. Long series, but I'll take the team I like better. Long series, got the bet wrong. Then, finally, last round against my own team, I finally admitted, okay, I've got to push it further. I'm not giving Dallas enough credit yet. I will pick Dallas in 6 or 7. Long series, but Dallas will finally win. So what happens? Dallas won, not in a long series. I lost my bet again. So I think Boston in 6 is the outcome here. I am specifically wavering, I guess, is a good way of framing it, by giving myself an extra out. I'm giving a margin of error. Boston 6 or 5 or 7. Give me a game either way, because part of me thinks I should be giving Dallas a little more credit here. Part of me thinks Boston is just the juggernaut, like I've thought all along, and we're just going to do this like we've been doing all the other series. I convinced myself either way, so I took both ends of it. So I am uncharacteristically giving back more outs than I would want to. Or sorry, I'm keeping more outs. I am not narrowing too far. I'm giving myself 3 ways to win. Kind of this is my version of Celtics -1.5 the last 2 rounds. This is my version of, I'm pretty sure I know who the better team is, but I don't really trust them to not screw around too much. Here's my bet. So that was kind of the wavering process to me. Why are you on Celtics here?
Yeah, so I started, the first thing I kind of do here is I'm 2 of 3 on Dallas, which is, I think, would surprise a lot of people considering how critical I've been of them. And I don't feel bad about that analysis because, again, it's not like I've been inaccurate in my betting on them. I've been pretty good on the series betting. I bet them versus the Clippers, and I bet them versus the Wolves, and I bet them heavy versus the Wolves. I didn't bet them versus OKC, and I am not a double downer because I think it's really important for you to be able to, one, admit, understand, and recognize your own mistakes and where you get stuff wrong. I'm not a guy that doubles down a lot. I will double down on that series. We said in the series preview for OKC, it's shot variance. This entire series is going to be about shot variance. Who's going to make shots? I decided to trust OKC, who had, to be quite honest with you, better shooters. I don't feel bad about it. PJ Washington made his threes. Derrick Jones Jr. made his threes. Isaiah Joe and Lou Dort, 39% playoff shooter this season, but in key games in that series, did not make them. The better shooting team shot worse. The worst shooting team shot better. That's sports. That happens. I don't feel bad about the OKC one. The matchup side for the Clippers and with Minnesota in particular, I was right about. So I started from there. Is this a series where Dallas can win on matchups? And when I went through it, I was like, no, these matchups are not favorable for Dallas. They're not awful. Like, there's stuff that we're going to talk about that they're going to be able to do. I'm not like, there are numerous reasons why I would never bet Boston sweep. Not just the Boston-ness, but also this specific matchup. I don't think Boston is so much better than Dallas, assuming that everybody's healthy, which has not been the case for Boston opponents. I would not bet Boston to win in a sweep. The Mavericks are better than that. The question here kind of becomes, a lot of it is, how much better do you think Dallas is than the other opponents that they faced? You said this series is priced very sharp. I think it's okay to think that, but I disagree. And one of the reasons I disagree with it is I've actually asked bookmakers about this. And the responses I've gotten from bookmakers is there are different, I'm trying to be very specific here. They understood on a series price level where the public and where the majority of the tickets would come in on, which is Dallas. And we've seen a little bit of that movement in their direction. What's interesting is, either correlationally or following the same concept, they tried shorting the game 1 line, which came out 5.5. Yeah. And Michael Fiddle and I both went, what the fuck? And you saw it. That line has been obliterated. You're never seeing 5.5 again. Unless you might see it game 2 if Dallas wins. But that line got immediately obliterated. But that was the first signal to me where I was like, wait. Because as a kind of example of this, the Denver Nuggets were 7.5 point underdogs in a regular season game in Boston this season. You're telling me the Mavericks are 2 points better than the Denver Nuggets were at mid-season in Boston?
Yeah.
That was the immediate point where I was like, something weird's going on here. This price is very much built off of the narratives that we've seen discussed, where Boston hasn't played anybody and hasn't dominated every single game. They are 12-2. That is not enough to get everybody excited or impressed with them. Everyone's still unimpressed with Boston. On the other hand, Dallas has Luka, who looks absolutely phenomenal, but he's back to his full health look himself. He absolutely annihilated the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were considered to be the favorite, right, to win the championship. After everyone was talking about Denver and Minnesota being the NBA championship effectively. If you'll notice, I never said that. And one of the reasons is I knew that Dallas was going to be a completely different matchup for whoever came out, and OKC would have been a different matchup if they had won that series. And so we get to this point where, but because the Mavericks have conquered the favorites in these series, their power rating has gone up so much. Boston's has come down, and I disagree with that movement. That's where my cap comes in here, is that I do believe that Boston does not have a matchup disadvantage. They have several matchup advantages. And I think that the market is reflecting way too much of a narrative on both sides to where the value in this has to come down to Boston -1.5 and a sprinkle on -2.5.
Yeah, I think regarding the pricing sharp, I think that is the words I said. I think I said it poorly. So let me redefine what I was meaning by that. I think more so, if I look at the pricing that we have right now, my read on the pricing given to us is Boston or nothing. But Boston is -225 at BetMGM, our sponsor, and I don't like to bet -225, so then I come away with nothing, and we are in the content business, and I can't come away with nothing. So I think Boston, if I trusted that they were healthy and ready to go, aka Porzingis, I think Boston should be north of -300. So therefore, there would be value on -225, even though it is a number I don't like to bet in a series. And look, I've done longer bets than that on the -1.5 the last couple of rounds. It's been fine. We've been rolling over some small winnings. That's what I mean more by, like, that's not sharp then. That sharp means neither side has value. I think Boston is the value side. I think, to me, where I am reading the market differently, and this is not a great strength of mine, so I'll defer to you and Fiddle on this. I'm reading the line being different than I expected, and Boston not as heavily favored as I thought, as not overconfidence in Dallas perception, which I think is totally fair and very likely. Let's not forget, Dallas won 3 straight coin flip games, then lost a game, then had one really good victory against Minnesota. It just happened to be the last game we saw, so that's the perception marker. If it had flipped the series around, even that I think would change our perception. I do think that's something. I'm interpreting it as Porzingis fear, and maybe that's just my own fear about Porzingis, but I feel Porzingis is such an important player on both ends of the court in the series, and even I've seen Porzingis props posted, but then taken down at books. And that's feeding into my fear of the unknown of, we just don't know, is he playing game 1? If he doesn't play game 1, does he play it all this series? Is he playing 20 minutes or 30 or 35 minutes? Is he effective? He's such an important player to me in the series that, to me, that fear about the unknown with Porzingis is creeping into the price and making me doubt myself a little bit. I agree with you. I didn't, after doing the prep this time, think, Dallas has some matchup advantages. I thought that each of the last 3 series. I didn't find that this series. I should have come away even more confident in Boston. And I did if Porzingis is playing, but I don't know if he is. And I feel like the pricing is perhaps warning me, because I have to assume that my information is not as quality as information that the folks pricing are getting. So to me, that's where I'm kind of tiptoeing in and why I'm giving myself a wider berth on my bet here.
Yeah. So a couple things on that. I'll say this. If you are of the belief, Kristaps Porzingis has not gone full practice 5-on-5. It is not that he hasn't been able to. They have chosen not to do that. You're also not going to see teams having full super hard practices at this point in the season. You're at the end of it. You've been playing for 6 months. You can't risk an injury in practice. Like, most of this is film. That's what most of it is worded, and then working on, they're walking through concepts. That's just how this goes. So I'm not scared off necessarily by the fact that he's not practicing 5-on-5.
Sure.
If you were somebody that just like it's okay to have takes about players getting hurt, especially in the betting market. I think that's totally okay. Like, something that we're going to talk about in the offseason is how I have just got to be aware of these injury things, and we just have to black Sharpie mark out certain bets and be like, we just can't do it. We just simply it'll be worth it if it happens, but you're never going to be able to. You can't. It is not worth tying up your bankroll in 6 months on Joel Embiid or Kawhi Leonard. It's just not. You can bet them if the moment arises, and you'll be able to get good prices on them. You'll lose some of that juicy numbers, but you just need to be able to do it. If you're somebody that's like that, and you don't believe that Porzingis is going to be healthy, you should bet Mavericks. We're going to talk about a lot about that later this week with Brian Fonseca and Joe Delara. And we'll talk about it on today's show as well. What I would say is I would say he is way more likely to play game 1 than he is to play game 6. That is more likely that he is more available early in the series. Getting him through to game 6 is going to be tough. There's been no description of a minutes limit. There's been no description of that yet. It will probably get reported sometime before game 1. He will get upgraded, and then he'll be listed as available, and then there will be a report from Woj that talks about that availability. If you want to bet based off of that, if you want to say, if he can't go 20 minutes, that means he's in worse shape. That increases the risk that he won't finish. You can do that and then bet Mavericks. That's totally okay. Because this price, I will say, based off of the conversations that I've had with people in the trading business, at least stateside, Porzingis has not come up. He's not part of the equation. And you need to consider that from the perspective of, from a regular season perspective, how much is he worth to the spread? Porzingis is probably only going to move the line, probably 1 point. Do I think that that's light? Yeah, I would probably bet. I would adjust power rating off of Porzingis by more than a point based off of his impact for Boston, and particularly in this series. I think that's accurate to say that he's important. The problem I have, Brandon, I think even if you do that, I think even if you said that Porzingis was out, well, let me ask you this. If I told you right now Porzingis is out, it's been announced, he just couldn't get there, he's not going to do it, should the Dallas Mavericks be favored in the series?
If Porzingis is out, I do not think the Dallas Mavericks should be favored in the series, but I am absolutely not making my Boston bet, and I think Dallas is the bet to make at the price.
At the price, series. Right. Yeah. So I agree with you on that, right? That the price here assumes Porzingis is in.
Right.
And based off of that, if you think Porzingis is in, as I do, Boston is the bet. If Porzingis is out and you can bet into this market, then Dallas is the side. After Porzingis was ruled out and the flood of money that would come in even more on Dallas, I would still want Boston. That's how I feel about this series. There's a simple cap here. We're going to talk about matchups and all the complicated stuff. And look, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I was right in certain series. I was wrong in certain series. All these types of things. I will say that the matchup stuff has done better for me this year than some of the other stuff. But there is a very binary 2 ways of looking at the series. The Celtics side is that the Celtics are better. They are not just a little better. They're a lot better. And they're not just a little bit better than the Mavericks. It's not about Dallas. They're better than everybody. And if you want to say, I don't believe that doesn't feel true, totally fine. You are welcome to express that opinion in the market. But these are some facts. Boston would have the best net rating of any team in NBA history to lose the NBA Finals based off of the playoffs performance. I just looked at playoff net rating, okay? Even if they came down significantly after losses, unless they were blown out by 50 every single game, which I think we can all agree is unlikely, Boston would still finish with the best net rating of any team to not win the NBA Finals. Dallas would have the 5th worst SRS, simple rating system, factoring in strength of schedule, point differential, of any team to win the title. So this would be a Dallas team that would be breaking all sorts of precedent here. So for me, this really does get into Boston is a significantly better team. The Dallas side of this is a very simple, guess what? The Dallas Mavericks have the best player in the series, and the Dallas Mavericks have the better coach in the series. I think it's very difficult to kind of argue otherwise in terms of Dallas having the best player and the better coach in the series. As much as I've dogged Jason Kidd, and this has been an infuriating postseason for those of us that doubt Jason Kidd, he outcoached Ty Lue. He did. He flat out outcoached him. Dags, I don't know about. There's like a lot of like Dags got out. I don't know. I think Dags did fine and got bit by shot variance, and he outcoached Chris Finch. He had every answer for what Chris Finch tried to adjust to. I don't think Chris Finch went far enough. I don't think Jason Kidd went very far because the matchup started in his favor, and Finch never got outside of his comfort zone. But he did enough, and he did add enough wrinkles, and he did adjust. He went to Lively more and things like that, and was able to get the win. And so he's beaten very good coaches and deserves that respect. Joe Mazzulla hasn't been, if you want to talk about the Boston hasn't been tested thing, which is such a popular narrative, that to me is kind of the answer here. Joe Mazzulla hasn't been in a spot where it's like, you better figure something out because they're killing you. He hasn't been in that spot. And if the Mavericks are able to get him into that position, I don't know how Maz responds. I don't know if Mazzulla's built like that. Joe Mazzulla to me is a great foundational coach. He is not a problem solver. And so if the Mavericks are able to present problems that I can't see because I'm not the smartest person in the room, and Joe Mazzulla has to adjust to those problems, I don't know if he can because he's never really been in a position to do so. And when he's been faced with it, he's struggled. There are some things I can point out, like the Sixers series last year. He made some late series adjustments to win that when they were down that were pretty impressive and good, but they were not like life-altering, oh my God, mind-breaking stuff. And I think he got coached by Spo in the conference finals. Now, that's Spo, and that's a hard bar to clear, but I do think that's a reason to do this. I listed in an article for Action Network the top 10 best / most important players for the series. And Luka was number 1, and the first line of Jason Tatum at number 2 was, Jason Tatum's not a top 5 player. And Celtics fans were like, this is really funny. And they weren't even mad about it. That's what was funny. They're like, no, it's true. It's just kind of really funny that like the first line in an article where he's the second best player in the finals is he's not a top 5 player. But it's also accurate. He's just not. Luka is. And so that separation, I think, is enough. If you just want to trust the better player, if you go back through NBA history and you go back through the finals, you're not going to find a lot of winners that don't have the best player. The difference, I think, is that most of the teams where they had the best player also had the best team. That's the problem here, is it's very rare that you find, oh, no, they had the best player, but the other team had the best team. And the market honestly reflects that. A good example of this, I went back and looked this up today. The Warriors were favorites in 2022. That was the series price, is the Warriors were still favorites. So that kind of shows you that it's very rare. It takes a lot for a team that doesn't have the best player to be favored in a series, and yet the Celtics are. A couple of other outliers that would have to happen in the series that I think are worth mentioning. Tatum's 5.1 BPM. I don't know if you know this, but Brandon Anderson, he doesn't really talk about it much, but BPM is a big favorite of his, would be 50th among title winners. Dirk 2011 is a pretty great player. That's who Tatum would be tied with for BPM. Another one, Luka would be the 9th best BPM among title winners, tied with Steph in 2015. That's the level that Luka's at. But what's interesting here is this note: no player to lead the league in usage, which Luka Doncic did this season, has won the title, and no player in the top 40 for a season all time has won the title. Luka would be the first one to do so. Luka's trying to break all sorts of historical markers here, on top of the fact that we've seen this has been consistent. I mentioned it early. If you're not a top 3 seed, you don't win the NBA Finals. You don't make the finals very often. You definitely don't win them. Doesn't happen very often. It just has not happened. And so all of these kind of things is the Celtics are a much better team, Brandon. But if you just want to go down to, I'll trust Luka Doncic and a better coach, I don't have much of an argument against that.
Yeah, to your point about top 3 seeds, we've had, I couldn't even believe this. We know in 1995 Rockets won the championship as a 6 seed, kind of a fake 6 seed, right? Because they kind of slog through. They're the defending champions. They get Clyde Drexler midseason, fake 6 seed, but it's fine. They won as a 6 seed. It's in the notes. You know the answer to this already. How many teams in NBA history, other than the Rockets, how many teams have ever in NBA history, 75 plus years, won a championship outside of being a top 3 seed? One more team. It's the 4 seed 1969 Celtics. Oh, we found a Celtics one. Another fake seed. It's Bill Russell's final season. Bill Russell ain't going out without winning a championship. My man only wins championships. That's what he does. They get to game 7, he won the championship. So they were the 4 seed, which, to be fair, was the bottom seed at the time. So they were the 8 seed effectively, but they're not the 8 seed. They have Bill Russell, okay? So in history of basketball, 2 times ever have we had not a top 3 seed win an NBA championship. So that's the level of outlier we're looking at here. And to me, back to the Luka best player thing, because that has to be where you start when you're looking at the series. This is the mantra for me over and over again. The way that I think about basketball, the big takeaway I came away with looking back at 75 seasons of historic basketball in my pandemic year of basketball history, teams win championships in basketball, not individuals. The individual you want in the series is Luka. Teams win championships. And I think if you look at this year's playoffs in particular, the story of the playoffs is that the best player in the series is losing constantly. This is a thing that's happened over and over again. Yep. Tyrese Halliburton was the best player in the conference finals against Boston. He got hurt. I know, this is what Boston happens this year. They're getting the Miami thing this year. All the luck is evening back out. Hallie was the best player. He lost. Previous round, Donovan Mitchell was the best player in that Boston series. He lost. Shea was the best player, better than Doncic. He lost. Nikola Jokic was the best player in that series. He lost. In the previous round, I think Embiid, Dame, Paolo, Harden have a pretty good case of the best player in their series. If you just look at the entire playoffs, exclude Boston and exclude the West top 3 seeds, the top 4 teams in round 1 where they're supposed to win, other than those series, 2 times out of 10 has the best player in the series won the series. This isn't what's happening. This isn't a Luka Doncic just takes over and wins the series. He did last round. He was one of the examples, but it's not happening that much. So that's where I that gives me some reassurance on the Boston versus Luka thing, even though you and I for like 2 years now have talked about the question that Boston fans will love to hear me bring up again. Jason Tatum would be the worst best player on a finals team since what? You answered that question. You had Dirk, you have Kawhi Leonard, 2014 version as a possibility. It's a fair question. It is not denigrating to Tatum. It is lifting up how good the Celtics team is. And I think that's the question here, is trying to find that balance. On the other hand, the reason I keep wanting to give Dallas a lot of credit in these series is because I have long been the Luka Doncic is that dude in the playoffs guy, and he certainly has been this year. Now we're at, out of 8 Luka series, 6 series have gone at least 6 games or more. Luka plays long series, and one of them is the one he just played that went under, the one that I finally bet the over on. Thanks again, Luka, for that one. Luka is 7-1 against the series spread. In this scenario, if that hits again, we're getting a game 7 or we're getting a Dallas win. To me, Dallas plus 1.5 being like the quote correct, the closest price, that's baffling to me. I can't get there on that. Like that, there's no way to me that the correct series spread for Dallas is to get to at least game 7. I can't get there. But historically, I have to get there because Luka keeps getting us there. So I'm kind of wrestling with that. And back to kind of what I said earlier is I keep giving Dallas some credit on my bet, more than I expected to, but not enough. So that's my bet here, is really agreeing largely with all the stuff that you said. I want the wider runaway. I like Boston 6. This gives me a game in either side. I get some variance with the Porzingis injury stuff. We're going to get into the variance on shot variance on threes and clutch play. I got the Luka factor. Maybe Luka or Kyrie just steal a game. Those are all outs here. Like, I am betting Boston and I'm betting a 3-unit play on it. I don't think it's impossible Dallas could just win the series, even with a pretty healthy Porzingis outcome. Like, that's in play here. I'm admitting that. That's why I want the 3-part bet here. So to break it down, Celtics in 5, 6, 7. It's plus 340 in 5, plus 475 in 6, plus 450 in 7. You're going to have to Frankenstein this. These are literally all 3 different books. The plus 450 is at BetMGM, our sponsor. So start there. I think that's actually an outlier price, and that's helping my bet out here. If I bet 1 unit on each, here's what I'm doing. I'm risking 3 units to possibly win either 2.4 units if they win in 5, because I'm losing the other 2 bets along the way, or 3.75 or 3.5.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing here. And just to point out the key difference in our bets is you're basically saying Boston in 6 or less, trending towards shorter. I'm saying Boston 5 or 7, trending towards longer. And part of what I like about that is, do I love the idea of my Boston bet hinging on Game 7 against Luka, the best player in a Game 7? No, sir. No, I do not love that. However, Dallas is still going to be like plus 200 on the money line because they have to, because it is a historic road Game 7, and they have to price it accordingly. So even if I get cold feet, as long as Dallas didn't win in 6 or less, if I at least get to a Game 7 with Boston, I can still play the 200 on Dallas and kind of get out scot-free on my bet and just be like, all right, no more Dallas. I've been wrong too many times. I'm out. So I like keeping the Game 7 part of my bet. My question back to you is this. I'm not disagreeing with anything about your cap. I think you're betting it wrong. I think you should be not betting Celtics minus 1.5, minus 2.5. You just said they're not sweeping. For a lot of reasons, we agree they're not sweeping. My entire bet is Boston not sweeping, winning any other way. Why aren't you just betting Boston in 5 or 6? Chop off the 7 if you don't want it. That's my bet. But get rid of the 4 too. Why wouldn't you juice your odds? You can bet Boston in 5 or 6. Same thing as me, but without the 7, plus 149. Why not just do it that way?
Because there are things that those games that spread buys you for insurance. And do I think that they're sweeping? No, as long as Luka Doncic is healthy.
Sure.
Which is the same thing I would have said with the Indiana Pacers.
Right.
As long as Tyrese Halliburton is healthy, I would have said I still think this. I think the Cavs take 2 games off of them if Donovan Mitchell is healthy.
Yeah,
not healthy, right?
That's fair.
And look, here's the thing.
Last round, I did the Celtics minus 1.5, and I think you did the same thing to me. And so why not just do Celtics 5 or 6? And I did the same thing. I don't want the sweep, but I don't want to lose the sweep just in case this is finally the one. So that's a fair counterpoint.
Yeah, that's the answer here. Is like I like the value on the Celtics to sweep them or win it in 5. I like the value on them to win in 6 or fewer, and both of those will win. Like, right? If it's Celtics sweep, I win both of those bets, right? Versus if an outlier situation occurs. A good way to kind of frame this too, we've talked for the last 2 seasons, we've talked about, hey, Boston's going to give them 1. Boston fucks around and they always give them 1. And last year it was 1 more than we thought. We thought Boston in 5 versus Hawks, it went 6. We thought Boston in 6 versus Sixers, it went 7. And we thought Boston in 6, I think, versus Heat, and they lost outright, right? This year, like I tried to like run that back and kept getting hit with the injuries, which is fine. But it was basically like, I think in that Heat series, I bet Heat plus 2.5 and they won 1, right? I bet Cavs plus 2.5. I lost that one because Mitchell and Jared Allen both got hurt. And then in the Pacers series, I bet plus 2.5. And I really do think that they probably would have won that had Hallie not gotten hurt. That happens. Like, that's just kind of sports here. And it's not that like you should be betting. I'm not suggesting that like everybody's gotten hurt versus the Celtics, so you should bet like the Mavericks are going to get hurt. It's entirely possible the Mavericks are totally healthy here. That's entirely possible. But I do think that there's these kind of outlier ranges. And one thing that we'll talk about a lot in these conversations, especially when we get into the Mavericks one later with Brian and Joe, is going to be the clutch stuff. We'll talk about here as well. I'll just give you a little preview. I think clutch stuff is largely noise. And if I believe it's noise, then I can't be like, well, the Celtics or the Mavericks are definitely going to win 1 close game. What if they don't? What if PJ Washington's should have gone in wide open shot rims out and Jason Tatum hits an Andrew Nembhard shot.
Yeah.
Right? It's variance. And then when we go this way. So to me, it's based off of what do the matchups and team differentials lead us to with the probability of these outcomes. And to me, the outcomes lean us in that direction. I do think an interesting question here, Brandon, is how much better do you think the Mavericks are than the Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton or the Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen?
So you and I disagree on this. I think by a significant margin, the Mavericks are better. So I am going into this series treating this as this is the final boss this Boston team is getting. We didn't get the top final boss that I would have preferred them to see, or a couple other villains along the way. But I am treating this as a very significant step up, especially because I think with Miami and Cleveland, we got a really good defense. With Indiana, we got a really good offense. This is the first time that we've had a more complete team package that had the offense and the defense and multiple ways to win, and that had the best player clearly in a series. Halliburton isn't necessarily the best player against Tatum. Luka Doncic clearly is. So to me, it's a clear step up. I know you think the margin's a little closer.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is, if we look at kind of how everything is played out, a lot of it is Dallas looks better than I think that they are. That doesn't mean I think that the Mavericks suck. It doesn't mean that I don't think that they're good.
Why are you a Mavericks hater, Matt Moore?
Why am I a Mavericks hater? The Mavericks fans yell at me. It's more a matter of they faced the Clippers without Kawhi, and they did a really good job of exerting control over that matchup. Like, honestly, like that was a coaching. That series was more coaching than anything. And Ty Lue, Lakers fans that were really sad when Ty Lue got extended, you should look at that series. Again, Ty Lue can be a very good coach, but he did that series badly. The Thunder series, right? That's a matchup thing that came down to shot variance where the Thunder were not equipped to be able to exert the things that they were better at over Dallas. And if you want to look at specifically what that is, what's the thing that really hurts Dallas if you're a 5-out offense? We'll talk about why in a second. Chet Holmgren shot 29% from 3 in that series. Chet's a rookie. They got that team at that point, right? And then the Wolves thing, we talked so much about it, about how much I love the matchups for Dallas in that series. I talked over and over and over again, right? And so the difference between Dallas and Minnesota was not so much that matchups couldn't overcome it, and we saw that, but we also saw, as Brandon mentioned, how close those games were. Dallas has gotten through these by basically being like, gotten a lot of shot variance, come out on the right side of clutch stuff. The other team's pissed down their leg a little bit. And that's entirely stuff that Boston can have happen to them. Like, I want to be very clear on this. Like, I think it's fine if you want to bet Dallas. I am not like, that's a stupid bet. That is not where I'm at in the series. I think the value is on Boston. That's where I want to bet. I think it is fine if you're just like, nope, don't trust Boston. I trust the Mavericks. They'll get it done. Totally okay. That's a fine cap. A good example of this is that for power rating purposes, I have Boston 8.5 points better than an average team on neutral court. I have the Dallas Mavericks after their win. I have them rated at 4 with where they're at in the finals. I have them 4.5 points better, or 4.5 points better than an average team, right? So it's about 4 points of differential on a neutral court of what I've got here. The question here is, like, if you look at and we'll talk about the game one line, how exactly does Boston have 1.5 points of, if we're using that? I can't look at that and bet Boston, or Dallas rather, because that would mean that Boston has 1.5 points of home court value. That doesn't seem right. So that to me is like a big consideration here. But that's like the way that I kind of look at it. For comparison's sake, that puts Dallas on the level as the Denver Nuggets in power rating and the Philadelphia 76ers fully healthy.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Like, those are pretty good teams. The problem is Boston is just way, 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 way better. And I do have the Pacers considerably closer to them, and the Cavs, especially full strength, were I think pretty comparable. Another thing to kind of keep in mind here is how much Boston has not been like this great two-way team in the playoffs. It's been defense in one round, offense in another. They were dominant defensively in one round versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, shot variance, and then dominant offensively versus the Wolves because of matchup. So it's like, I don't look at the Mavs as this incredibly balanced team. And that to me is
Hmm.
a lot of where we kind of get to. Do you want to start talking about matchups?
Yes, let's get into it.
So let's do this real quickly. Give me your ranking. We do this with the Wolf series. I think it's a good way to kind of look at the matchups as a start. What are the 4 best units? Dallas offense, Dallas defense, Celtics offense, Celtics defense. Rank those from best to worst.
Yeah, this is really tough. I always do this when I'm looking at these series, and I really struggle here. Like, you know, the old board game Boggle, you like shake it up and see what comes out. I could see at the end of this series shaking up these 4 and being like, all right, that's the way the 4 stacked up. All right, I can see that. I think the one I am most certain about, which is terrifying, is that I'm going to put the Celtics offense first. That is the ratings that we have from the season. That's what the data says. So I'm going to have them first. And then I go Mavs defense, Mavs offense. Celtics defense is my last rated. I am a little worried about the Celtics defense that we have seen, and it again ties to the Porzingis thing. If I feel better about Porzingis, I feel better about their defense. But those last 3, Celtics offense first. The last 3 I can really be talked into any order, and it depends on the series and the matchup and all sorts of stuff. How do you rank them?
First, I want to give the rankings here in the playoffs because I do think it's really important to kind of put in the context of this. Boston's offense is ranked number 1. The Dallas offense is ranked 6th. Dallas's defense is ranked 4th. Dallas's defense is ranked 6th. So the order should be Boston's offense, Boston's defense, Mavericks offense, Mavericks defense. That's the statistical ranking of how these are evaluated. I have it Boston offense, the Dallas defense, Boston's defense, the Dallas offense. In large part, one of the reasons why, and like I'm very tempted to flip this to Boston defense being second.
I'm as a listener, I'm processing. So Matt, you think Luka Doncic on offense is the worst thing in the series versus, so Brandon, you think the team with Tatum and Drew Holiday and Derek White on defense is the worst thing in the series?
Yep.
Yeah, we got 2 really good teams in a fun series. That's the translation here.
So one thing I do want to point out here, no one, okay. Do you remember the Knicks series with the Pacers and how I was like, I really wanted to bet the Pacers and everyone kept telling me I was stupid? Do you remember that?
I remember this, yeah.
Now, that's on me for not betting it. That's on me. And they don't win that series if Knicks are fully healthy. But I think it's accurate for me to say, hey, I thought Indiana was way better than everybody else did, and they kept winning and pushing. And even in those conference finals, the Pacers put up incredible numbers because their offense was elite. Regular season, post All-Star playoffs, Indiana's offense was elite. You cannot stop them. They are too good with too good ball movement, too much pace. They are too well coached offensively. The defense stuff is terrible, but that's how good that offense is. And you go like, really? Like, come on. It's like Nembhard and Pascal. Come on. No, I'm telling, like, go watch the games. Look at what they shot, man. So when Boston's defense still ranks 4th, and the answer there is going to be like, they face the Heat without Jimmy Butler and then the Cavs without Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen. Fair, right? But you play who's in front of you. And if we're going to do the whole like, well, the Celtics haven't had to play anybody. They faced the number 2 offense in the entire NBA playoffs in the conference finals, and they still came out with the 4th best defense.
So let me ask you this on the unit ranking. We didn't clarify necessarily how we were framing this. I ranked the units. My order is based on what have I seen through 6 weeks of the playoffs. Based on what did I think a week ago as these series were wrapping up. That's how I rank them. I would have a very different ranking if I was ranking these units for this specific matchup. Which way did you frame it in your ranking?
I framed it on like where we look at them at this point in the playoffs. Like, okay. I ranked them similar.
We're on the same page with that. Mm-hmm. To me, just as the preview we were going with this, I had Celtics offense first. I'll stay there. But I had Mavs defense second, Celtics defense last of the 4. I will flip those two if I'm looking at it in the series and it's Weimar and
Really?
Boston. Yes.
God, that's really fascinating because I would do the exact same for mine. I would have Boston offense third, Dallas Dallas offense third, Boston defense fourth. Because I said this in the Wolves series. I think this is an over series. I think we're going to see a ton of overs in this series. I think it's going to be and this is going to be a big differential point when we start getting these matchups. You have a lot more faith in two players in particular in versus one matchup than I do. And there are reasons for it. All right, we're going to take a break. That's part 1 of our series preview for the NBA Finals. We got so much more to get to. We'll break down all of this in part 2, which you can find in your podcast feeds. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, as well as Hutton Jackson, the crew, getting us up on youtube.com/The Action Network. Stay tuned for part 2 of our big NBA Finals preview. Till then, let's get buckets.